Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's PMI Friday webinar, Brace for Impact with Warren Knight. I'm Susanna Clark, and I'm going to be facilitating today's session. I just wanted to take a moment to mention our Lean Practitioner Yellow Belt course. The information is at the top of the screen. You can see it's a fantastic course. In fact, I was lucky enough to run our first live event back in the classroom with Dennis Cromentine Marsh for a customer just a couple of weeks ago. The course combines lean tools, soft skills, psychology, and all the improvement principles using the Kaizen methodology. Our next public course is coming up on the 29th and 30th of June. And as with all our public courses now, you can choose whether to attend in the physical classroom or to join virtually. So please do have a look on our website, and I've also put the link in the chat today. So on to the main event. I'm going to be running the Q&A and the chat desk for today's webinar, and we'll be using this throughout the presentation. So you can find the Q&A and the chat buttons on your Zoom control panel. Please do keep your questions and any comments, any observations. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you experienced something different? Please keep putting them into the chat, into the Q&A, and I will put them to Warren. Today's webinar is being recorded, and as always, we will send you a link via email early next week to the full recording, both the audio and the presentation. We're also broadcasting live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So to those of you who are joining us on those live streams, we welcome you. In future, if you want to participate in any of our polls and also to receive the recordings via email, please do register for the webinar at pmi.co.uk/webinars. For everyone who's registered today, we will be sending you a short voice of the customer survey at the end of today's session. We're really grateful for your feedback as always, and in particular, any suggestions that you may have for future topics that you'd like us to cover. Hopefully, when you look at our June schedule, you'll notice some of the comments that we've received, and that we are building our future schedule based on your feedback. So thank you all for your continued support. And now I'd like to hand over to Warren.
Thank you, Suze. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Warren Knight, and I'm a Director Consultant and Head of Strategy here at PMI. Today, I'd like to share some thoughts of mine I have around how we evaluate our improvement initiatives. Commonly, what do we focus upon? What do we cover? And then, more interestingly, what is it we're not focusing upon? And therefore, what's the hidden opportunity for helping us to actually improve the way that we improve? Now, I want to start today's session with a poll, and this is going to seem a little strange, taking into account how I've just explained the session in my intro. But what I would like you to do is to think about how easy is it for you to find time for improvement versus your business as usual work. Do you find it very easy, moderate, somewhat difficult, or very difficult?
And that poll is launched, and I can see you're starting to vote, so thank you for that. I think it's a really interesting question, Warren, isn't it? Because of course, sometimes it depends on the type of role you have as well.
Sure.
That comparison between I'm doing my business as usual job, which is to be hopefully leading PMI successfully with our leadership team. But how often do I make that time available also to improve the system compared to someone whose job it is solely to be focused on improvement? So I'm expecting to see a range of different answers here today.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point.
So last couple of seconds, if you just want to cast your vote, if you haven't already done so, and then I will share the results. Thank you, everybody. So hopefully you can all see the results there. Warren, is that what you're expecting?
Actually, Suze, it was. So the reason for the poll is sort of what I'm noticing more and more often working with clients is that clients are really challenged. We're busy. And so actually investing our time in improvement activities in order to make more time into to make changes and get better is really challenging. In fact, I suspect the actual cost of improvement, financial cost of improvement, is not so much an issue for organizations, but having that time and space to do it absolutely is.
I think
so.
Sorry, I was just going to say, well, sorry, there was something I forgot to mention. For those of you who are on live streams, the answer to the poll was a resounding 52% of people saying they find it somewhat difficult to find time for improvement. And interestingly, we've just had a point in the chat saying that my job is solely finding improvement opportunities, but I still face so many blockers.
Yeah, yes. And of course, we all know when we lead change, actually it's the involvement of the organizations, the involvement of the operators is absolutely critical to success. So yeah, so we all, even if it's our daily job, we still feel the pain of this issue.
Yes.
Great point. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, everyone. I shall stop showing the results. If you need to go back to them at any point, Warren, just let me know.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So on that point, so today I'm talking to you as leaders of change, and in a sense, we're all leaders of change. We don't have to be senior managers. Even if we're just making changes to our own daily work, then when in a sense we're leading change. And of course, we're all driven to make things better. But of course, taking into account what we've just talked about, our time is very precious to us. And so we need to make sure that when we invest time, that we make the right improvements. And so it's on that point that is the, if you like, the context for today. That for me, when we initiate, when we carry out a change activity, what we're actually doing is we're making an investment. And there's lots of cost to that investment, not only the time and the financial costs, but softer things like the emotional cost of change, the effort that it takes us. It's a risk. It may not work. So our reputations are on the line as well. So it's incredibly important, of course, if we're going to make investments, that we need to get feedback from those investments. On that point, again, my experience suggests that the way in which organizations track their change initiatives and therefore their investments, if you like, varies considerably, as one might expect from, simply at a local level doing some simple extrapolation. We've reduced the cycle time by half an hour. We've got 40 employees, half an hour times 40, et cetera, up to really quite sophisticated benefit realization management systems involving teams of accountants who are looking, in a sense, at the effects of the changes that we're making. Having said all that, there are some common themes I see, of course. Benefits delivered. So what return did we actually get from the initiative, and how does that reflect on what we were predicting? In often financial, actually, more often than not. Initiative costs, actually, other than those initiatives where there's a large financial cost involved, new computer systems, etc. I often don't see organizations tracking time so much in terms of how much time has been invested in, what's the cost of that, which is interesting taking into account the poll. Progress against plan, obviously, again, sort of that question of are we on track to deliver the project, the initiative, mainly focused upon progress against plan in time rather than quality. And we'll pick up on that point later on. And, there may be some form of suggestion scheme, some opportunity hopper where, we're asking the question, so what opportunities do we have? What investments can we make? And if I, as a change leader, think of myself as an investment manager, because that's what I'm doing, I'm making investments, then of course I want answers. I want answers to all these questions. There's a big but though. In my experience, I'm left a little underwhelmed by these kind of questions, because they're questions that are there to confirm what has happened. And in a sense, what they do is they give me some sort of binary answers, yes or no. Do we achieve the goal? Yes or no. They're not helping me to understand why I created or delivered the results that I delivered. And so therefore, they're not really helping me to learn about what I'm doing, and therefore the results that I'm creating, so that I can maximize the initiatives that I'm running at the moment, but also I can learn and improve so I can make future initiatives even better. And of course, again, as any good investment manager would want to do the same, wouldn't they? So all of what we talked about so far is important feedback, but actually, if we're going to learn, we need an additional and different type of feedback than what we commonly focus upon. Now, at this point, I've mentioned learning, and I'm sure a number of you are thinking, well, okay, but I've got this sorted because we do lessons learned. Okay, well, that's good, because that's more on the line of what I'm talking about. However, again, in my experience, I'm going to ask some questions for you to reflect upon. So who's the audience for those lessons learned? Are they aware that they are the audience? And what do they recognize to be their responsibilities, if you like, around doing something with that feedback? Are those lessons learned captured and reviewed at the end of the initiative? Or actually, is this a rolling theme throughout the initiative? Because I think that makes a big difference. Is there a formal process in place for how data and information around the lessons learned, so the context of the lesson as well as the lesson itself, is collected? And a really key one for me is around, is the lessons learned, is it a process for learning? Are we expecting the participants, the audience, to be in a learning process at this point? Or are we simply reporting the lessons that other people have learned, like the improvement team? And on that basis, what I see is really not generally, and I'm happy to be proven wrong in the next poll, but generally I don't see a lot of commitment. I don't see a lot of effort being put into either the generation of those lessons or the review and transfer of them. Which brings me nicely to my second poll of the day. So based upon what I've just said, and I'm going to kind of read this out because there's lots of words, so I'm going to give it an extra bit of context. So in your opinion, which of the following options best described your organization's approach to both capturing and transferring lessons learned? First one is there's no requirements, so therefore we don't. I often see lots of organizations where we recognize that lessons learned is good practice, but we don't drive it in any formal way. Or do you work for the kind of organization where it's a recognized requirement to be done, but there's no process in place to help people to do that effectively? Or finally, the holy grail, if you like, where actually it is a recognized requirement. A standard process does exist, and people do adhere to it and are expected to. Really interested to see what this one.
Yes, I remember sharing with you, Warren, one of my early experiences of working in a project that had a very formal lessons learned process at the end, and that was great. And when I asked what happened to them, they said, "Oh, these get shared on the server." So that was interesting, because that just felt like doing it for doing its sake.
Well, it's a great example, because for me, that's about reporting.
Yes.
So we've learned something and we're reporting it and we'll capture that. Whereas what I'm looking for is a situation where we're challenging people to actually learn from the data that's being presented to them.
Yes. And I've just had somebody, thank you, Lucy, in the chat saying it is considered more as a paperwork exercise where the data is filed and never looked at again, which is exactly what my previous experience have been.
Yes, I don't want to be that harsh, to be honest with you, but yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for voting. I'm going to end the polling and share the results now. So again, for those of you who are on our live streams, it's option 3 that has achieved the most votes. So it's a recognised requirement, but there's no standard process in place on how it's done, has received 50% of the vote, followed by it's considered good practice, but no formal requirements exist, 21%. Recognised requirement, standard processes is, and it's adhered to 18, no requirements at all, 11. So yes, quite a range.
Yeah, but actually, meets my prediction, I must say. So, okay, thank you again, everyone, for contributing to that. So, we're expanding our thinking around this a little, and I believe if we are only focused upon the improvement of our organizational performance, and we're not considering in the improvement of the way that we actually improve, then are we continuously improving? So for me, being sort of a devotee of continuous improvement, I'm just as interested in what's causing the results in change initiatives as I am the results themselves. And therefore, in my mind, I'm using a slightly different term. I've got a slightly different definition of what I'm looking for. And what I'm trying to look for is impact, which gives me a broader view of the world. Okay, this idea, I'm looking for effects, not just benefits. So if I want to evaluate what's causing the results, then I first need to consider that in itself. So we have here, of course, the outcomes, the results that we're experiencing in our improvement initiatives. And of course, we all know that what we achieve is directly driven by what we do. So our improvement goals, the methods, the techniques, the activities that we apply. But that's not the end of the story. The question is, where do those things come from? Where do those improvement processes come from? And of course, the answer is us. They come from our assumptions, our attitudes, our mental models, if you like, about the world, what's important around improvement, how we think improvement is best carried out. So it's the old definition of insanity. If we carry on using the same mental models, okay, we're going to get the same results. We should never suggest for one moment that we're going to get different results. And therefore, if we really want to in the future continuously improve and really transform the results that we're creating, then we need a transformation in thinking. We need to really challenge our mental models. Doing so, first of all, requires us to recognize and to generate feedback in all 3 areas. So not only here, but also here, and importantly, of course, here. And if we do that, the added thing we need is a slightly different way of learning. So let me just pick up on that for a second. So typically, if we think about improvement, it's of course driven by learning. The more effectively we learn, the more effectively we improve. So what we're doing in our change initiatives, we'll start by having some form of trigger. We will observe performance, and when we compare it to some defined goal, we actually automatically say, well, this needs improving. There's a problem here. So we analyze the situation to try and understand the root causes. We develop solutions to change the process. We implement those solutions. And then, of course, what we do is we then observe performance again to see if the changes that we've made have resulted in improvements. And this is nicely reflected in some of the ways that we commonly evaluate our initiatives. Now, for me, that's what I would call single loop learning. Now, if we're really to transform our mental models, our way of thinking, therefore transform our improvement results, then we need to add another opportunity for learning here. And that is, at any point, to actually assess the goals that we've identified and the value of those goals in terms of how are they really helping us to improve ultimately. The assumptions that are driving what we're doing, and of course, what we're doing, our methods. And through assessing of these things in light of what we're observing in terms of performance, it gives us the ability to be able to drive improvements in our goals, our assumptions, and of course in our methods, which leads to better and improved solutions. And what I'm talking about here is double loop learning. The idea of sort of assessing our assumptions and assessing our methods and our techniques is relatively straightforward, I think. Assessing the value of the goal, it's probably worth taking a moment to think about that. So what are we talking about here? So we're looking at whatever goal we've created. So look at your project charters, okay, for an example. What's been stated as the goal of the project or the initiative? And the question would be, so what's the assumptions that are driving that goal? And therefore, is it a useful goal? Now, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but I'll sort of let you read them on the screen as I discuss them. But I've witnessed lots of situations where teams have been really driving forward, trying to work towards an improvement goal, only to realize that actually that's not a valuable goal and actually needed to reframe the goal and the assumptions that sit behind it. So instance, the first one, an improvement team that were charged with reducing the product range, because it was deemed to be overly complex, but actually started to realize as they grappled with this problem that actually a more useful goal was to look at how they manage the range profitability. And I see this a lot, this drive to reduce the cost of servicing, only to realize that actually it's impacting customer experience, and actually ultimately is that a value, or what's more valuable? So I'm going to leave you with a thought for just a second in terms of being a leader of change. What are your goals generally, and what's the value of those goals? So I want to now move from sort of that background thinking, and hopefully it's raised our awareness that there's much more we could be evaluating about the work that we're doing, and much more benefit we can be getting out of it. So I want to move now into more so thinking about how do we actually measure impact? Well, it starts with actually, again, this idea of goals, assumptions and attitudes. Because if we don't have a clear view of our goals, and this applies to our assumptions and attitudes as well, then we are not going to understand what data we need to collect, and therefore we're not going to be able to evaluate and learn. To help sort of describe sort of where I'm coming from as a change leader, I'm going to use two common goals that I see in organizations, and I'm going to describe them in terms of films that I've actually seen. So a common goal I see or require, all the time, relates to this idea of the Jerry Maguire film and Show Me the Money. Lots of goals are around show me the financial benefits and show them to me today. That's what I'm interested in. Now, of course, that's fine, that's valid, and there may be a lot of motivation and driving force behind that, a lot of pressure, of course. But if our jobs is really to help the organization to continuously improve, then it's very present orientated and is not very focused upon the future and how we continue to make better investments and better improvements in the future. The other sort of goal that I see is build it and they will come. So large training programs focused upon developing the organization's competence around improvement techniques. Again, so that's a bit more future orientated, more around developing the platform and the competencies to continuously improve, but not really thinking or focusing upon getting traction upon. So how is that going to actually work? It seems that there's just some kind of hope that people will start improving as a result of the training. So of course, what that means is, for me, my goals around continuous improvement have dual focus. I need to be focusing upon creating impact and benefits today, but at the same time, I want to be focusing upon how I'm having an impact and creating a better opportunity for further improvement in the future. And that, in my view, requires us to focus upon many areas in terms of improvement. So not just the business system itself, the equipment, the systems, the people, the processes, but it also requires us to focus on and improve the leadership and management systems, because it's by those systems that we actually drive improvement. So we could strike that out and we could just write improvement system there. Of course, competence, it's people that improve ultimately. So their competence, their motivation, and of course, back to assumptions and attitudes, the culture, the mindset and the behaviors that underpin all of these things. So sort of looked at it from a goals perspective, but of course, as I said earlier, we also need to relate this to the assumptions and attitudes, because again, if we're not aware of the assumptions that are driving our goals and driving our actions, then we're not able to really evaluate and learn about what we're doing in the context of what we're achieving. And this works at both the overall level, but it also works at the individual task level. So as an example of this, I've just put here just a few of my assumptions and attitudes that I hold very dear in my own improvement work, and I'm very clear about. So from a systems thinking perspective, I feel it's really important that we work together in order to optimize the whole, okay, rather than sub-optimize the parts. That our aim is to create predictable behavior, not just in people, but in processes and performance as well, because systems rely upon predictable behavior. In terms of learning, I think we only learn effectively when we engage with the actual situation, the actual place, the Gemba, some might call that, and we're collecting the actual facts. And from a psychology perspective, I really do have a belief that ownership for change comes through involvement in change. So if I take an example of a simple activity of flowcharting a process as part of an improvement program, then I can start to overlay those assumptions and help me to think about exactly what am I trying to accomplish and what impact am I expecting to have. So of course, the technical goal of flowcharting is to learn about the process in order to improve it. But taking into account my assumptions, I'm also looking for that flowcharting to engender collaboration. What I really want to see is people from different teams and departments coming together, collaborating, sharing their views, sharing their experiences, sharing their problems, so that everybody gets a better understanding of the end-to-end process, because that's the only way that we're going to optimize. That this flowcharting has been done in the context of the Gemba, where the process is, and that the people doing the flowcharting, and hopefully that includes, of course, the operators, are studying the process with their own eyes, with their own ears. And that as an opportunity through this flowcharting, I mentioned this idea of creating predictable behavior, that people get an opportunity to share their methods and identify best practices that if we all adopt and work consistently to, then we improve performance overall. And importantly, from the psychological perspective, again, that people have had that opportunity to be involved, to share, and a sense of contribution, and therefore that feeling of ownership for driving improvement forward. And so all of a sudden, if I'm aware of my assumptions and attitudes around the improvement work I'm doing, suddenly my field of vision, what I'm interested in understanding, okay, in light of my goals, increases significantly. I think it's also obviously important to recognize that improvement is a process in itself. And so if I'm going to really evaluate what I'm doing to cause the results that I'm getting, if I'm really to improve my improvement approach, then I need to recognize it as such. And of course, what I need to do is I need to collect data on all aspects. So I need to understand, well, what's the inputs to this improvement methodology in terms of the people, their competence, their motivation, what methods are they using? It always rings for me the old Deming quote of doing your best is not good enough. You must first understand what to do and then do your best. So the methods, what methods are being employed here, really important to recognize and collect data around those things. Obviously, the activities themselves, what's happening, which are going to set us up for improvement, as well as the actual activities to make the changes and hopefully cause improvements. And then we're now getting closer to where the impact is, if you like, which is, of course, the outputs of the improvement process, which are essentially changes, be it changes to working practices, equipment, competence, etc. Those changes should hopefully generate positive outcomes, be it changes in performance, be it changes in experience, in competence, in motivation. The impact, and of course, words mean different things for different people, and I'm sure a number of you out there have quite defined definitions. It would see impact as maybe being something different to outcomes and different to outputs. For me, I very much feel that the impact is a catch-all term. So for me, the impact could indeed be the outcomes themselves, or it could be some wider implications of, or knock-on effect, if you like, of those outcomes. And it's all of these things that I want to be examining, collecting data around, so that I can really create a rich picture of the situation. On that point, what I do in my practice is I create what I call an activity impact plan. And what that enables me to do is to really think about the various activities, what I'm doing. And then it drives me to focus upon, so what are the key inputs to that? What are the outputs being generated? What knock-on effects or outcomes do I expect those things to generate? You might call that the direct impact. And then, of course, you've got the wider impact. So the further implications in reverberations. And then once I've laid these things out on paper, most of the time it becomes much more obvious to me then to create that data collection plan, to figure out what is it I need to be focusing upon, what data do I need to generate. And of course, you'll notice what I'm looking at here is not only quantitative data, it's not only numbers, but actually qualitative data as well. And that's always really important for me because it's the qualitative data that gives a context to the numbers. So, and again, hopefully, as you listen to me and you're reading what's on the screen, hopefully, again, what's coming through to you is that I'm not just looking for the financial benefit here. I'm looking to see impact around people's motivation, people's competence, their experience of improvement, because again, as I said earlier, these are all the foundations for future improvement and are providing the platform, if you like, for further, hopefully better improvements. Okay, so moving on to then the data itself. And again, mentioning that idea of creating a rich picture. You can see here, this is actual feedback collected from various improvement programs within PMI. And hopefully, if we just have a look at it, we'll get a sense of the breadth and depth of the picture that we're creating for the audience here. So here up in the corner, we've got a picture there. We've got some evidence of a confirmation process that is being developed in one of the clients, which is recognizing, the improvement in the management system. We've got some data here about the actual improvement program itself and the progress of the quick wins and improvements being made. We've got here in the middle a photograph of some really, what I think are some really good practice SOPs here, which have been generated by the operators to help them do the work. We've got some before and after photos from a 5S activity. Also, of course, we've got a control chart here down in the corner, which helps us to understand what sort of impact there has been on actual performance. But importantly for me, I've also got some qualitative data. I've got some quotes, some feedback from people who are at the heart of this improvement. And these really do give me an indication of, in the background, what platform am I building to enable this organization to move forward and continuously improve and get better in the future. This one over here, Joe, process owner, in the bottom left-hand corner, it's given us the platform to deliver on ideas that we've been discussing. Fantastic. It's given me those clues that my assumptions in my attitudes and my predictions about what constitutes good improvement. I'm getting some data back to test these. Tools, bottom middle here, tools are allowing me to think about where else we can make improvements on other processes. Music to my ears again. So I'm getting a really warm feeling that actually we're doing more than just creating results here and now. We're making good progress through these improvement initiatives, and we're also building for the future. So I've talked about thinking about what it is we're trying to accomplish and being really clear about that, our goals, our assumptions, and the techniques and activities that we're using. Creating a data collection plan and doing that early on so that we don't miss the opportunity. And thinking about the data and different types of data, focus in different places, and how that data collection plan, the impact activity plan will drive that data collection. Of course, then it's a case of how do we then use that data to help us review what's going on and to communicate. And the point here in the green box comes back to me from earlier in the lessons learned. Reviews aren't about presenting data. A good review is where everybody participates in the learning process. So for me, my approach is, and I will offer these things to you, is make sure that everybody who is involved recognizes that this review is a learning process, and actually they're part of that learning process, and they have a responsibility to learn as part of their role, whether they're an operator, whether they're a senior manager. It doesn't matter. We all have a role to play in improvement. So therefore, we should all be taking the opportunity to learn from this data, to test our assumptions, to test the values of our goals, and to say, what can I learn from this and how can I apply that? Therefore, all key stakeholders must be involved, okay, must have access to this information, this data. And again, it's not only senior management or the steering team, it's other stakeholders as well, like the operators, like the improvement team. I'm very, part of my attitudes and assumptions I mentioned earlier is that I don't believe you can learn effectively if you're not practicing the three actualities of go to the actual place, witness and observe the actual process, and collect the actual data. So for me, reviews, if I'm doing it right, then I will give everybody participating the best opportunity to practice those 3 A's, be it by having actually the review by the process, where the process happens, or as earlier, and I hope that demonstrates, I can actually provide lots of photos and evidence which transports people to the Gemba, okay, where the work happens, where the value is added. I also really like to encourage those who are involved in the process of improvement, either directly, they're leading, they're part of the core team, improvement team, or indeed they've been involved providing their advice or been part of flowcharting, etc., to be part of that review and telling their story. What have they experienced? And having that feedback firsthand is just absolutely fantastic. Of course, be rigorous in your approach to learning. Strongly encourage everybody to apply PDSA, to recognize what they're trying to accomplish, to be clear about their theories. What were they trying to do, and what were their theories about how they were trying to do it? And then look at the evidence, the data that's being presented, and really challenge themselves to say, so what is this telling me about my theories about improvement? What is this telling me about my theories and my predictions about how this improvement initiative is going to play out? Okay, so that we can act. Okay, we can be decisive in our decisions, and therefore we can adopt those theories and those attitudes and assumptions that seem to be working for us. We can adapt those which are positive but not quite getting us there. And of course, we can abandon and find new theories, new assumptions, okay, new techniques, etc., where they're proving to be unhelpful, and really challenging people to make sure that they do that. And in that way, we're doing that double loop learning, and we're going to see our ability to improve in the future improve. Make them regular. And of course, this is difficult, isn't it? Because of course, it's back to the initial poll of it's very difficult to find the time for improvement. And so again, I often see stakeholders, sponsors saying, yeah, you know, I really want to have the reviews, but you know, they haven't got time, and those reviews slip and they don't happen. And it's a terrible shame. Final point is, of course, make it part of the work, okay, as much as you possibly can. Suze, hopefully you got a question for me.
I've got a question for you. We've been asked if you could just say a few words about PDSA approach to learning. I think some of the people who are on the webinar today not as familiar, haven't been part of our training previously, and therefore not familiar with PDSA. If you just give a couple of minutes on that, that would be really helpful, Warren.
I sure will. Thank you for the question. So, it's back to my beliefs again, my attitudes and assumptions. So I strongly believe that improvement comes from learning. And so if we want to be effective at improvement, we've got to be effective at learning. And if we look at scientists, actually it's their job to learn. And scientists are pretty good at it. They're pretty good at learning. So let's copy their process, their mindset for learning, which is often referred to as the scientific method. And so what Plan, Do, Study, Act represents is applying the scientific method, if you like, for improvement. So of course, we call it PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act, but actually, in truth, we start at study. If we're a blank sheet of paper, we start at study with research. And of course, that's what scientists do. They research the situation. We do the same. We research our performance, we research our processes, we research our equipment, we research the voice of the customer. We do a lot of research. And from that, from those studies and the data that's collected, we induce theories, we create theories. So now I'm into plan, if you like. So I'm going to just use a pen here. So we go from what we sometimes call study zero into plan. And at the plan stage, we're developing theories. Those theories are either about root cause, what's causing the performance that we're seeing. So think about what I've been talking today. Or indeed, they're theories about solutions. So what can I change in my process that might give me better performance? So either type of theory works. And of course, actually, we use both types of theories, hopefully, in our improvement programs. Now, of course, a theory, okay, and, you know, in the sense we've been talking about today, you know, my assumptions, they're theories, they're not truths. So the next step of the scientific method is to then experiment, to test our theories, to see whether they stand up in the real world, if they give us the results that we're expecting. And so when we study those experiments, okay, it should give us data that we can compare with our theories and our predictions around our theories, which should then lead us to act, which is when we make a decision. Does it look like from the experiment that it's a good theory, so we adopt it? Is it a decent theory, but not quite meeting our predictions, so do we adapt? Or actually, this doesn't seem to work in practice, so we abandon that theory and we start again.
Great, thanks, Warren. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So So really now to the end of this approach, if you like, for measuring and evaluating our impact. And that, of course, is about transferring the learning. So again, remember that everybody has a role in this. But actually, I'll be honest, my belief is that actually the learning ultimately is owned by the leaders and the sponsors of change. Because of course, it's our accountability. We own the improvement methodology, we own the improvement system. So therefore, it's our job, it's our responsibility to improve it. So their role, of course, our role is to challenge and enable the organization to improve, to maximize the results from the initiatives that we have today, but also future initiatives. And that really requires us to build the transfer of learning into our daily work, okay, as leaders and sponsors. So when we're chartering a project, I mean, this is PMI's charter here, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little area down here which says what are the enablers and risks that we need to be aware of in order for this project to be successful. Well, actually, shouldn't we also include in that? So what learning from previous projects do we need to incorporate in here to make sure we're successful? Okay, so it's a way of institutionalizing, if you like, that transfer of learning. Again, when we're approving a project to go ahead or an initiative, okay, what opportunity have we got to then say, okay, what do we need to take into account here? Or what have you taken into account in terms of previous projects, previous learning, and how does that relate to what you're presenting to me and what I'm approving? The improvement methodology itself, I don't think that needs to have too much of an explanation. But interestingly, talking to a colleague of mine the other day, who mentioned that in one organization she worked in, their improvement methodology, they used DMAIC, which is a Six Sigma methodology. They added a T on the end for transfer. And actually, the transfer bit, in other words, transferring the learning, was seen as just as important as any other stage of the improvement. And of course, this is something we should all take on board. A lot of the leader's role is about teaching, okay, and supporting and educating. So, you know, every opportunity that we have for coaching is an opportunity to transfer that best practice. And of course, close out. So in summary, if we really are serious about continuous improvement, then we need to include our improvement system in our focus. And if we really want to improve that improvement system, if you like, we have to be aware of our assumptions and attitudes. And we have to use a slightly different learning approach. We have to make sure that we're not only learning about our processes and learning about our organization in performance, but we're also challenging ourselves to say, are we applying the right goals? Are we applying the right assumptions and attitudes? Are we doing the right things here? Have a plan for data collection and make sure that plan is clear and in place before you embark. Otherwise, you're just going to be left going, oh, I wish I just got some feedback. I wish I benchmarked how operators felt about their work before we started improving it. And finally, numbers on their own, pretty useless. Okay, so I've got a 12 times return on investment. Fantastic. That may help us breathe more easily. You know, it may help us sort of breathe a sigh of relief that we've met budget. But actually, on its own, what can we learn from that? How can we make it a 14 times return on investment next time? So any sort of final thoughts, really?
We have had a question in which is about, you know, what does one do if one has got a whole load of learning from a number of previous projects, a number of steps for risk mitigation. However, the senior management aren't necessarily on board with that. How can they be persuaded? And I was just trying to answer in the chat. Really, that's down to influencing skills at the end of the day, and that's a whole nother topic. But it's made me think we ought to have a webinar on influencing skills. So I will bear that in mind. Thank you for the question. I think it's very, there's no quick and easy answer to that. Do you agree, Warren?
I absolutely. It's a huge question, and of course it's a great question. There's something again about the three actualities and the need. Change starts with people being dissatisfied, okay, and recognizing and surfacing that dissatisfaction. And it's maybe the start is, well, how do you use that data to help surface that in the organization? Great topic. I'll look forward to that one, Suze.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Just before we close out, a quick reminder, if you are interested in learning more about Kaizen improvement, then please do have a look at our website for more about our Lean Practitioner Yellow Belt course that's coming up. Look out for the Voice of the Customer survey. You'll be getting that at the beginning. Oh, you'll be getting that shortly. And as I said before, we do really welcome all of your feedback on today's session and any suggestions you have for topics for future weeks. So thank you, everyone. It brings us to the end of today's webinar. On behalf of PMI, Warren, and myself, thanks for joining us today, and I hope you all have a very safe and a very relaxing weekend. See you all soon.
Thanks very much.